This is an invitation to stop hiding. And I'm super excited here because I have a special guest for this episode. This is Andrew. He's a life coach based in United States, and he coaches stifle creators to use their passions as a means to unlock and rediscover their powerful, authentic self. He does it in this way so they can stop holding themselves back. He's right now in a process of finding his own voice, unlocking authenticity, and diving fully into his own hero's journey. Hey, Andrew, finally we are here.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, you hear me okay? Are we okay? Yes.
Yeah, we're good. Can you hear me?
Good. Yeah, we have some technical problems when starting, but I think everything is fine here. And I'm super honored because I wanted to have this conversation with you, Andrew, for some time because we meet each other in threads and this social media app I always talking about in the podcast because this is basically the only thing I use in the social media world. And I was looking at your different posts and this specific name you have in the platform, Unchained Andrew.
Unchained self.
Unchained Self. Unchained Self. And I resonate with that because this feeling of getting yourself free, freedom, it's about freedom, it's about authenticity, about being able to flow with your true self. I resonate with that, man. What can I say? So, how are you feeling, Andrew? How are you feeling first?
A little bit nervous, but I love that you invited me on here because, again, it's an opportunity for me to practice what I'm talking about and express my authentic self and just be here. So I love it. I love that you resonated with my name as well, because that's why I wanted to put it out there. That's my main message. That's my main, I don't know, like the spirit behind what I'm trying to do, I think.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And yeah, this is good news that we are resonating with this message and also the person on the other side maybe is resonating. I think, I'm guessing is resonating with this, with stop hiding. Maybe Andrew, can you tell me also and tell the audience how was your path to this place you are right now, in which you are exploring this deeper level of authenticity? Where you come from?
Hmm. Well, it's a long path, but the more, closer version of it, if I want to shorten it down, is that a few years back, I was a software engineer and I felt very, very stifled in my career. And there's many things behind that, but eventually it just got to a boiling point and I eventually quit my job. I was like, I got to find something new. There's something wasn't working. And I joined a group coaching program that had a really powerful impact on me. It was run by a guy called Dr. K. Are you familiar with Dr. K?
Not sure, not sure.
He's I think he's a Harvard grad psychologist, or
Mm,
and he now runs a big like group coaching program thing,
mm.
and he actually specialized in doing gaming addiction related things. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting niche stuff. But he got really popular on the internet because he started interviewing all of these Twitch streamers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a group coaching program. And I didn't have gaming addiction, but he talked a lot about things like related to spirituality and stuff like that. And I
Mm,
thought, hey, maybe this guy would be helpful to talk with. I
mm-hmm.
resonate with some of his stuff, and I'm trying to figure out like what in the world am I going to do with my life now?
Mm-hmm.
Do I still want to do coding? And it was through that group coaching where he basically, instead of just, coaching us, he was also helping us kind of coach each other. So it was a very
Yes.
interesting dynamic between us. It wasn't just we are the coachees, like we're
Mm.
the clients. We also, in talking with each other, took on some of the coaching principles.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was very helpful for me to improve um, through coaching other people, not like directly, but just in a
Yes,
conversational
yes.
style. It helped me realize that my self-talk was just out of whack. My self-talk, the way I thought about things was so out of whack. And as we kept doing this program, it went on for like years after that he left, but we just kept going.
Mm.
I got really into it. I loved having these conversations. I loved it, and I loved thinking about it. And then I realized that people were giving me a lot of feedback that I was actually really helpful to
Mm.
talk to. And it kind of, short story, like after that, like exploring different options, exploring startup companies, exploring doing freelancing coding, I realized that, hey, maybe I should explore this coaching thing. And I jumped into it, and here I am.
Yeah, amazing, man. I can resonate with a lot of things because it's creepy in one sense. This threads up because you're a software engineer also, and I didn't knew that so until this point. So it's crazy because we have the same kind of background. In my case, it was a little bit different because I was at the beginning. I was more into the art part. I wanted to be a professional musician for a lot of years. That's why I studied formally sound engineering. And
Yeah.
the problem here in Argentina is that generally in the whole world they say it's difficult to live as a professional musician, but in Argentina it's 10 times more difficult because yes, here we have always in perpetual economical crisis, and
Uh,
each president you have is worse than the previous president. It's like that kind of cycle, endless cycle of crisis, and whatever. The thing was that I was living playing guitar on the trains, man. That was my main job basically, and I was freelancing. Obviously, I knew about WordPress development, so I did some websites here and there.
yeah.
And thanks to coaching, I realized that I wanted to change my profession, and I like fully embodied this software engineering thing. But then at some point, I also realized, hey man, maybe I need to be a coach. Maybe that's the path. Maybe that's the path. But I see we share that kind of background and kind of thinking. And before this conversation, we talked about this concept of uh, as a software engineer, you are engineering logic in a program, but as a
Yes.
coach, maybe you are like
Engineering minds. Yeah.
engineering minds, maybe. Who
Yeah.
knows? Yes. And
Yeah, I think so. It's all about engineering your beliefs and your attitudes towards things.
yes, and I'm curious about what is your main motivation to pursue this path of not only coaching but also authenticity?
Well, part of it, I think, is maybe an inherent disposition somewhat. Because as a kid, I was very, very like obsessed with like what was true. Like I was very honest and very curious about things. It was just my natural state. And maybe everyone's like this, but I just know for me, I was definitely like this. My parents would call me a what would they call me? It was like they basically said I was like I was always like, well, technically, about everything. And that was the kind of kid I was. I just like I want to know is true. And if people say something that's not true, I'm like, well, what about this? What about that?
Yes.
And I feel like later on in life, my curiosity was dampened in a lot
Mm.
of ways. Like I felt like I was kind of forced into different boxes and different dimensions of life.
Mm-hmm.
And when software engineering, even though I left software engineering, I don't even think the problem was software engineering exactly. It
Mm.
was the approach of it. It
Yeah.
stopped, when I was by myself and if I want to code something, I could have a fun time. I really could.
Mm.
Um, Actually, like last year, around my birthday, I was really obsessed with this board game, and I loved it so much that I wanted to play it with my friends who lived across the United States.
Yeah.
And so I made an online version of the board game just to play with them, right? So like
So
the
difficult.
problem isn't software engineering. It's
Yes.
it's like that passion and it being true to like who I am. And so yeah, I think it's just maybe it's just a personality thing, but it's also a journey of having lost that aspect and kind of rediscovering it again. I think
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to me.
Yes. Yes. I can't stop resonating. It's like resonating like a bell. Yes, yes. You know, one insight I had when I told you about this change of profession I had
Right.
is that I was very stubborn because I want to live out of my art. I want to live out of my curiosity, my passions. I wasn't so because of that, I was very stubborn with living as a musician because I say, okay, yes, music is I don't know what I want to do, and but at some point, thanks to this coaching process, I recognized that it wasn't about necessarily this particular path. It was about the value behind it. Like what you're saying is, it's not about the software engineer. It's about the approach or where you come from when you approach it. And I recognize, okay, what I want to do is I want to create. And I want to create things
Yes.
I'm passionate about. And I realize
Yes.
when I'm creating a website, I'm also creating. So why not? So I open, that was a big breakthrough for me to be able to open my mind out of what I was doing, like very stubborn. And okay, I can create in a lot of different ways. And maybe there is a possible universe in which I can create, and at the same time, I'm not struggling in survival mode. Maybe there is another possible universe. So I open myself to that kind of reality. I don't know how to say it. But yes, same here, man. Curiosity and creation, and it feels so good when you are in that state. And it's about authenticity. Definitely it's about that. It's about right now. I'm in. I think I told you I'm in this kind of webinar. It's a 4 days webinar. Each of these days is based on a different keyword, let's say. The first one is joy. The second one is authenticity. No, sorry, courage. The third one is love. And the fourth one is trust, something like that. It's Steve Pavlina. I don't know if you know this guy, but well, he has a blog and he's in personal development. And I was exploring yesterday and today this joy and courage aspect. And I think authenticity is, I don't know, it's a cousin of this, like joy and courage, because courage mostly, no? I think? Yes.
I think you're right. Or at least in the transition point for sure.
Yes.
You know, you have to have the courage to be almost joyful about who you are. In a weird way. Like but I imagine, at least I hope, I think after, like what I found is that when I do step outside of where I'm comfortable and I do act in courage, that the thing that I was afraid of changes.
Yes.
And what I mean, like my perception of it changes.
Yes.
It maybe the fear doesn't go away completely, but it definitely like gets, it goes away as I face whatever that thing is.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think you have to have courage to step out. But I think after that, as you keep going, I think it just turns into joy. And then you have more things to be courageous about that you have to step out to. And I think it's a process of courage to joy.
Yes, yes,
You know?
yes. Yes, and what would be, I'm thinking about two things. Maybe what if I ask you about some of experience you had about this courage aspect? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? That will be one question. Maybe I will ask you that. Yes.
I have a very silly one. Is it okay? So like a summer ago, or maybe 2 summers ago, I I decided that I wanted to conquer my fear of bees.
You fear of what?
Bees.
Bees. Oh,
Bees. Yes.
Wow.
I'm afraid of bees, but unlike other fears, it felt entirely illogical to me. Because even if it was like a bumblebee, which doesn't sting you, I would still react. It was especially difficult because there was no rationale behind that. Like if it was like a honeybee, I could be like, okay, it has a stinger. There's something to be afraid of. I understand.
Yes.
But I realized like it was interesting to actually tackle this because I realized just how emotionally based these fears are versus logically based. A lot of times when we're tackling fears, we're like, I have to convince myself to like want to try to do this or that or whatever. Use all this logic,
Yeah.
but truly at the heart of it, it's an emotional thing.
Yes.
And you believe in some way that you're going to be unsafe, just based on emotional reasoning. And I after 3 weeks, 3 weeks I went out there and I would literally just sit outside near where I knew they were, and I'd close my eyes, and even just the sound of the bee created like a reaction within my body. What was interesting, kind of similar to what I discussed before, as I kept doing that willingly, my perception of the bee changed. And soon I was able to, before where I couldn't even look at the bee like for a sustained period of time if it was close, I was able to actually look at the bee, and the way I saw the bee was different. I saw its little dangling legs, and I was like, wait a minute, this thing's kind of cute. I would have never said that about bees before. Yes, they pollinate flowers. Yes, they're good for the environment. They're useful. I would say all these things, but cute, never would have said that about bees. And it sounds kind of silly. I told it to my friends, they laughed. They're like, what, bees? But really, it's a serious, like, really, it sounds silly, but people have a lot of fears that they think are silly to other people, but for them, it's very, very real. It's a very, very real experience because it's an emotional thing. It's not really a logical thing. Another thing, I guess another story, less afraid of this one actually, but arguably should be. I went to Poland to meet Wim Hof and go on an expedition. Do you know who Wim Hof is?
Yes, I know. The guy,
Yeah.
the ice guy.
The Iceman, yes, exactly. Now, oddly enough, I was less afraid of doing this than the bees, but there were some similar principles. And for this one, I guess for the bee one, it was like I felt so limited by this. I was like, I like going outside. I want to go on hikes.
Yes.
And the fear of bees is stopping me. These bees aren't going to do anything. So that was the motivation there. The Wim Hof one was like, yeah, it's scary to go in the cold water and do this cold exposure stuff, but I wanted like a deeper connection to my body. I wanted to feel powerful, like there's a kind of like power to be able to do these sorts of things. And I wanted to like, transcend what I thought was possible, about myself. And for that one, man, my mindset really, there was a point where they had us, we were in a room and we were just talking about the idea of going into the water. And then our teacher's just like, all right, you guys seem ready. And we were like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, let's just go. And then that day, before you go into water, you have the option. They gave us the option of like wading into the water, like slowly, like walking into it versus jumping into it. And I made a decision to jump in because I knew, so you think that's crazy, right? But I knew for me that the idea of wading into it would be way more suffering than just jumping in. For me, it would be, because I'd be like, oh, God, that's how I would approach it. And that's kind of how I approach this podcast, to be honest. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to jump into it. You asked me, do you want to be on this podcast? I'm like, let's just go.
Yes.
But I jumped into it, and immediately it was like I was shifted to, my body kicked in doing like what it needed to do. I was, you're in it. You just got to do it. And my perception of the cold changed. It changed from that point on. It changed. I think of the cold as something, obviously, like if you're not careful, it could have certain effects, but your body knows what to do. You are designed in some sense to adapt. And I think you can apply that to a lot of things. It's not just the cold. It's not just bees. Your body is designed to adapt to whatever you actually address.
Beautiful. It's trust.
Trust, yeah.
No? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And there is this, this applies to authenticity, definitely, because if you want to be authentic, I think it's about trusting that you will be okay. Because why you are not authentic? Why? Because you are afraid that something, you will be harmed in some way or something bad will happen. In example, this podcast episode, probably you were afraid of this before. and you had to trust in some sense that everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And you know what I think? I was thinking about this bee's metaphor because it's like a metaphor also. The bee
Yeah.
is a very insignificant animal. It's fragile. It's you do like this with your hand and boom, you explode the bee, and she cannot do anything. It's very fragile. But this emotional thing makes us, even though from outside it looks like silly, and hey, from a logical standpoint, nothing wrong can happen, but from inside it still feels like a big deal, and it's how it is. Okay, and there is no way to bully yourself out of that. It's how it is, and you have to accept, okay, yeah, I am afraid of this, and yeah, this is it. And you did this process of exposing yourself progressively to this fear that you had, and this was healing in some sense. And I'm thinking about something I'm experiencing right now with the podcast also, in which I recognize through the podcast all this emotional baggage I have in myself that is not logical, because this is not a big deal. Nobody, my integrity or my survival is not compromised by speaking out loud in a microphone and sharing my thoughts. You know, it's completely illogical. And probably it's the same for you. I mean, you were like you had some fear about doing this experience, and now you jump in and we are here talking. And maybe something we can say to the person on the other side is that this is a fully experiential thing. It's like there is no way to bypass this kind of uncomfortable aspect of it. Like, okay, you're going to feel like shit, and you're going to expose little bit by little bit to the water, cold water, or maybe it is the V. And eventually, when you're on the other side, you're going to see it differently. This is maybe the message we can give. I don't know. I'm thinking like what to say to encourage the other person to jump into the water.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think, when I mentioned the jumping in versus the wading in thing, I think either way you will come out better off. But I do think wading into it slowly, it just extends the suffering sometimes.
Yes.
And and it allows like more opportunities for you to say, oh, do I really want to go deeper? Do I really want to go deeper? But either way, if you successfully wade into it despite that, you'll be better off. If you jump in, I think you'll be better off. But it's the attitude behind what you're doing that really matters the most, I think, as you're going through your process. And it could look different for other people, I think. So I don't mean to say that the wading in is inherently worse or something like that. Because even with what I did with the bees, it was kind of a wading in process. Like,
exactly, I was thinking about that.
I slowly like let myself, because it was a very strong fear, and again, ironically stronger than my fear of the cold.
Yes.
Even though most people would say jumping into freezing cold water it's more dangerous than being stung by a bee.
Yes. In my case, I think I would have choose the progressive approach for the water. In my case, because I'm more afraid of water than bees. In my case, I don't know how to swim. In example, I don't know how to swim, how to float. So I'm useless in water. I'm useless completely. So yeah, it's interesting. This I think depending on how much fear you have, you can design your own training process to get through it.
Yes.
No, right? It makes sense.
I think so. And I think, and I have other examples in my life too, but I think once you have a couple that you really, sometimes it happens by accident. Someone pushes you into something, you have to do something but when you choose to do something, and that was scary, like of your own volition, and then you realize like, wait, I came out good on the other side, and my perception of this thing has completely changed. It starts to open the door for other things, what's actually possible. And if you go back to the idea of like authenticity, a lot of people are inauthentic because they believe that there's all these different things that they're afraid of, and that if they even happen, that it's going to be this bad thing. And those things could happen, but a lot of times they're not as bad as you actually think. For example, I would imagine with the podcast, like maybe one of your fears could be like, at least it would for me, negative feedback, comments or whatever, right?
Yes.
And those things can happen, but I think your perception of those things can change over time. And I think people forget or don't ever realize maybe that your perception of things are malleable.
Yes.
So these things that you're afraid of, they really can change.
Yes. I can think about 2 examples of this. In one point of my life, one of my, I don't know, maybe my first breakthroughs in my life, like in personal development or that kind of stuff, like deliberate breakthroughs, was about the dealing with my fear of rejection. In the sense of, because I was a kid and I was very shy, and I like a girl and I wasn't able to even talk to the girl. And this was like until I was 20 years old, something like that. It was, okay, man, maybe it's time to to start because I was suffering because of that. For me, it was a big deal. It was something that it was blocking my authenticity, definitely, because I wasn't able to share my honest feelings with a girl, sexual feelings mostly. I was repressed in that sense. I didn't want to be rejected. And I did a lot of training on that. I was doing deliberately approaching not only girls, in general, people, because just approaching an old woman for me was a big deal also. Maybe the one we say, oh no, she will not give me the hour.
Even she doesn't want me.
yeah. Because I was super afraid of everything. And what happened eventually, after a lot of exposition, is that the rejections were like nothing. It was like, okay, yeah, she's telling me ugly things, because when you expose yourself regularly, you will face a lot of shit, and people can be very ugly with you and say horrible things. And eventually, it stopped bothering me. It stopped. It stopped worrying me and everything. But it was after a lot of reps of doing this. After a lot, and in the middle, before that point, I had all the trauma triggering in, of course. Like sometimes after these sessions we have with a friend of, okay, we're going to push ourselves, and okay, I'm going to talk to 10 different people. Okay, me too. And we push ourselves into this kind of process. Sometimes I end that process like crying, because with anxiety, angst, everything at the same time. And from outside, it was, what the fuck, man? What what the fuck are you doing first? And second, it was like a bizarre kind of thing. Nobody I knew was doing these kind of things. Nobody. It was like an experiment I had with my friend. And that was very like inspiring for us. Oh, look what we are doing. This is crazy. But eventually, after that, the rejection stopped. At least in that context, it wasn't a problem anymore. And because of that, I was able also to perform doing as a musician. So after that, for me, it was very easy to get into the stage, because it was like I got that fear, like deconstruct a little bit. And right now, having this podcast would be impossible for me if I hadn't experienced that before. So yeah, I think there are like different levels of this thing, of how you expose yourself to this fear that is not allowing you to do whatever it is that you want to do. Be authentic, because maybe we need to define what the fuck is being authentic. I don't know. Maybe that would be a good thing to do. But I understand being authentic as like removing this filter between who you deeply perceive yourself to be versus who you actually are in the outside, or the actions you take. And maybe that's authenticity, how I see it. I don't know how you see it. What's authenticity for you?
I think I've been thinking about it a lot and just like playing with different definitions. The one that I'm landing on more so now has to do with, it's removing a filter for sure, but
Mm.
I think it's removing the filter that prevents you from expressing your loving intentions.
Oh.
So, for example, sometimes people think like expressing your anger is like really authentic.
Yes.
And in a sense, it is like there's some sort of feeling behind there. But when I examine it deeper, there's usually something that you like, something loving actually behind the anger that you're really wanting. And sometimes
Yes.
people aren't willing to express that because that's more vulnerable than the
Yes.
anger, actually. And so, in a sense, because I'm saying it's more vulnerable, that reveals that it's actually the more authentic
Mm.
truth.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Oh, yes. It's like I remember this quote from, I think it's Dalai Lama. He's big on this thing that everyone wants to be happy at the end. Even Hitler wants to be happy. So he doesn't want to harm anybody else, or at the deepest core, he only wants to be happy, and he doesn't know how to do it. He does his
Yeah,
best to
yeah.
do it, and I don't know why. It's like there is this loving aspect behind everything. Like we are all the same. We want to be loved, and we want to be accepted, and I love others. When you go to the root of it, so it seems that if you're aligned with love, you probably are aligned with your authenticity in some sense.
I think so. I think so. And like, if you think about it, like as a kid, like you stop doing certain things because you think, oh, if I do this, I won't be loved. I'll receive punishment. But
That's it.
but really, you want love. You want to be loving, and you want love. You know,
Mm.
and when you are trying to like force your way on others, it's because you think that you will feel more loving or loved, or you'll love yourself more by having possessions or whatever it is, by forcing your way. That's really, yeah, I agree with you saying about even Hitler. I'm sure in some
Yeah,
way,
a bit extreme.
some way.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but really, I think it's true. I think it's true. It's the real core motivation behind why we do things.
Mm.
I think it's gonna give some sort of inner fulfillment, peace.
Yes, yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love
But
it.
with like you said about rejection with women or anything, I guess.
Yes.
The What I was thinking was the key thing is like, what do you tell yourself after? Yeah, you get rejected, but is that what hurts you, or is it what you tell yourself after about it? Like, oh, I got rejected, that means this about me, and I'm not lovable or whatever. You know,
Yes.
I feel like a lot of times
80%.
it's just the reaction. It's not the
Yes,
thing.
yes, yes. 80% is that, but also it was very like some necessary reaction. Like it was like very visceral kind of thing. Like there is no way to reframe this suffering, this pain that I feel in my body. Like naturally comes because obviously like trauma based, probably something like this very deep inside. And that's why I say this a lot of this is, I don't know, 80% experiential thing. We can talk about this, but if you on the other side, you don't make the move and don't start leaning in with courage to the things that you want authentically want to do, or um, that are an expression of your self-love in one sense, and that need you to trust that you are still loved even if you get
Yeah,
rejected or whatever. No, it's like everything
yeah.
is mixed up. Everything is love and courage. It's like everything is mixed up in this authenticity cocktail in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. And the pain I guess reveals like whatever you're holding on to that is preventing self-love anyway. So yeah, I love, that's why also I love that you're doing this podcast and talking about some of your struggles as you're doing it, because
Yeah.
I feel like, as you're doing this, I think you mentioned this, it's a self-development journey just to realize like, wait, I'm holding on to all this baggage. That's why this is hard.
Mm,
It's not just the difficulty of the literal what you have to do in the podcast, but it's all
mm.
this psychological stuff you're holding on to that you didn't realize if you didn't try to do the podcast.
Yes, and in my case, it's like the podcast is an exercise of the pain I feel when I expose myself is what is healing at the end. At the end is what heals me and what helps me remove the unnecessary shit, let's say, and to be able to do this in a more effortless way. But there is another way but to expose your core being and start doing this exercise of removing the bullshit, the masks. And I think this has been an excellent episode, Andrew.
Me too.
I could continue for sure. Maybe we can do a second part. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly had a great time. I know that I came into it nervous, but honestly, once we started talking, I just love talking to you about this. It was great. And my perception has changed. Like
Your
honestly,
perception changed, man. Yes.
perception has changed.
Wow. Well, this is an example of what happens when you dive into the cold water of doing a podcast.
Yes.
And this is an invitation for you that you are listening to this episode and that you are sharing this space with me and with Andrew to dive in, stop hiding, little bit by little, you can start moving forward in this direction. Maybe you jump into the cold water and you do it, and it depends on where you're at. Andrew, how can people reach back to you and connect with you and talk with you?
You can find me on Threads where we discovered each other, UnchainedSelf.me. I'm also on Instagram by the same handle. And I have a Linktree link. I need to find it. It's Linktree at UnchainedSelf. Yeah, that's how you can find me.
Excellent. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll see you or we'll hear each other on the next episode. See you next time. Bye-bye.